Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And you know, there's that old saying of be careful what you wish for. So we're now in the latter half of the year, heading into the fall, so you know, you're starting to look back on the year that was and contemplate what's going to happen, and also trying to make sense of the weirdness you have just lived through. And for me, part of that includes looking back at the films that I've reviewed and starting to contemplate my end of the year top 10s, which I'm very much looking forward to doing this year because I haven't done them for a couple of years for reasons I'm not going to get into, but I'm very much looking forward to the end of the year wrap-ups and once again giving my opinions on the best, the worst, and the in-betweens. Problem is, at least until recently, is that I've kind of found that there haven't been that many outwardly bad movies this year. There have been ones that haven't been great, and there have been ones that have been a little disappointing, but in terms of the ones that I've reviewed, there haven't been as many outright abominations that I just couldn't stand. There have been a few more recently, but I've been wondering, like, are there going to be enough to make a top 10 list? If you're wondering, the rattling sound there are some coffee mugs that are on my passenger seat that I'm taking to my office. Anyway, so yeah, starting to think, wow, I don't know if there are going to be enough bad movies to make a list. And then I got dealt an entire plethora of them, and this one comes in steaming hot. Yes, it is time for another rendition of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. Oh boy. There have been so many of these things. You know, not quite as many as like Dracula or something like that, but there have been a lot of attempts to capture that visceral feeling of the War of the Worlds on screen, be it movies or television shows. The last movie rendition was the Spielberg Tom Cruise lukewarm vehicle that came out in the early 2000s. There have been a couple of television shows in the interim. But this is the first one in, I'd say, at least 10, 15 years, maybe more. And why not? Spielberg himself says that renditions of War of the Worlds tend to come around when the populace at large is in a state of extreme anxiety. I don't know what he's talking about. You know, what do we have to be anxious about these days? Oh, God. But here's the thing. Here's the problem with these movies, is that all of them have fallen short. In my opinion, every movie, television show, every adaptation of this has fallen short of the granddaddy of them all, the one that looms high. And for once, it's not a different movie adaptation that is setting the gold standard, you know, like the original Superman or Spider-Man. It's a radio version. For my money, and I think most people will agree with me, the 1938 October 30th broadcast of the War of the Worlds as presented by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air is the definitive adaptation of H.G. Wells' original novel. It is the one that I think, whether they know it or not, all subsequent versions have been trying to measure up to. And they all fall short for a couple of reasons, which we're going to get into a little later. But here we have an adaptation that decides to take a new slant on this. And the frustrating thing is that it almost works. Almost. It's long been my assertion that no one sets out to make a bad movie. Movies that fail usually fail because just something went wrong in the construction, something went wrong in the DNA, and you can usually see that there's one or two almost redeemable elements to almost any bad movie. And I say almost because there are exceptions, of course. These aren't hard and fast rules.
There are certain rules that one must abide by.
What about the rules?
This version has a kind of interesting setup. So, our story this time is from the point of view of Ice Cube, who is playing a computer operator for the Department of Homeland Security. One of those, I watch everything, I can hack into anybody's phone, read everybody's email, I know what everybody's doing, and everything you're doing is being cataloged, and, all of this stuff. Privacy be damned, it's to keep us safe, that kind of person. So it should come as a surprise to no one that he is estranged from his children because he's overbearing, he invades their privacy, he spies on his daughter. He can delete video games off his son's computer somehow. It's also very clear that his children do not approve of what he does for a living. They're always challenging. How can you do this? Privacy, people's autonomy, blah, blah, blah. He is also, of course, still reeling from his wife's death. Basic stock types. Again, I preference that's not a bad thing because stock types are time savers. They're visual shorthand. And one of the rules of a good War of the Worlds movie is, I think, the best elements of it, much like the book and much like the radio show, are that our point of view character is from the everyman, the person on the ground, or people on the ground. This isn't like an Independence Day kind of thing where we get to see information from the president and from the tech genius who discovers it, or the fighter pilot. The War of the Worlds has always been at its best when we, the audience, it's reacting just like we, the audience, would if this happened. Again, person on the ground scenarios. So this idea of all of this kind of coming through the point of view of this person who's maybe not so much on the ground, but is in one location throughout the thing, kind of watching it unfold, is an interesting concept. And that is the format of the movie. It is all done, I'm not even sure what these are called, because I know there's been a couple of films that are done like this. I guess they're kind of the ancestor of the found footage movie, where it's all one person sitting in front of a screen. It's done in real time, and our interactions are all through FaceTime and messaging and email, and you see it almost through the eyes of the person at the screen. There have been a couple movies like that. I know there was an episode of Modern Family like that. It's not quite as prevalent as the found footage movie was back in the early 2000s, but you can tell it's kind of a distant relation. So here's where the movie actually does something really great and has come the closest to being what I consider to be the ultimate War of the Worlds movie. I have long maintained, I did a whole TikTok about this, that a War of the Worlds movie I would like to see is one done almost like a documentary that's pieced together from news footage, people's cell phones, things like that, especially in this day and age where we record everything. We have the ability to document everything as it's happening. And I'd love to see a War of the Worlds movie that is like that. Again, kind of through the eyes of the people living it as it happens, and not just doing it from one person's perspective, because that was always the downfall of the found footage films. No matter how creative they tried to be with it, you're always in that kind of, why does this person not just drop the fucking camera, kind of thing. So if you're doing it from a bunch of different people's phones and YouTube videos and all that, you don't have that problem. So I've always wanted to see a War of the Worlds film done in that perspective. And from the minute the asteroids start landing and the alien tripods start emerging, that's what I got. There is a good, solid, I'd say, estimated 10-15 minutes of this film that are everything I ever wanted a War of the Worlds movie to be. And I must admit that I was completely engaged and engrossed and going, yes, this is what it should look like. I mean, aside from some elements that we'll talk about here in a second, but for that brief period, this was almost perfect. And I was excited. I'd heard bad things about this film, and I watched it to kind of get an idea of how bad it was, and I was sitting there going, am I gonna have to champion this movie? Not that I mind doing that, but it is exhausting. So yeah, that 10 to 15 minute section is phenomenal, pieced together from news reports, from the different camera angles he can get, people's uploaded YouTube videos, everything I wanted to see, exactly how I wanted to see it. And then the rest of the movie happens. Holy fuck, does the rest of the movie happen. So, okay, there's a lot to get into. I'm going to take these in no particular order. So first of all, I said that 10 to 15 minute footage was almost perfect. By almost, I mean that the CGI and the design of the alien tripods are some of the worst designs and CGI I've seen in a long time. The designs look like something out of a video game. They look like a cutscene from some futuristic war video game. They look awful. Compare these, and I don't praise it much, but compare these to the truly alien and horrifying designs of the Spielberg movie. And yeah, they are just, they're awful. They're just, the CGI is awful. The invaders themselves are awful. They try hard to make it different, and I can appreciate that. The idea that the species that is attacking us is basically cybernetic, that they're machines and biological entities merged, and the actual invaders are little bugs that are tiny little micro machines that are controlling these larger machines. That's an okay idea. It's interesting. It's boring and ugly and doesn't look good, and it's stupid, especially considering the next stupid plot point that they try to deliver us. But I can at least applaud them for some attempts to be original. So the stupid plot point, and I'm sure you've heard this, is that these aliens eat data. Data collecting is their food. And apparently, you know, in the hellacious backstory that they tried to give this, apparently they've been here before. They crashed in Roswell when we first started developing computers, and of course the government knew about it. And you know, the more technologically advanced we've become, and the more data collecting has become an art unto itself, you know, the more of a threat that these invaders pose. So there's a lot to unpack here. So number one, I want to know, how does eating data, like, how is that food? They very clearly say it's their food. It's what they're here for. It's like, are they like Brainiac, who's trying to gain all knowledge and then wipe out planets, you know, after cataloging them? Is it literally their food? And the way they choose to illustrate this, you know, for instance, you know, the Martians came to eat Facebook, basically. You can also tell which online services the makers of this film were allowed to use and which ones they weren't. They were allowed to use YouTube and they were allowed to use Facebook. I still have my Facebook account. I still like my Facebook account, but come on. That's not where all the data is today. It's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's X, it's Snapchat, but they clearly did not have the rights to use those videos. So, or that setup or those names. So, yeah, so the aliens came to eat Facebook. Only Facebook, because they apparently leave YouTube alone. So going after data, apparently doesn't mean our, what do people, our reaction videos, our online, movie reviews, our wrestling podcasts, you know, that they don't care about. It's just your status updates and your photo dumps on Facebook. That's what they've come for, folks. And oh my God, it could not be more obvious. All right, look, I understand product placement. I get that it's the world we live in. It's been the world that movies have lived in for decades. Complaining about it is just ridiculous. My only thing is, can we try to make it a little less blatant? The title of this movie might as well have been Amazon Saves the World. Because Ice Cube's daughter's boyfriend is an Amazon driver. He has to deliver a flash drive to Ice Cube to save the world vis-a-vis a Amazon drone. They make the joke about, you know, the Department of Homeland Security caring about what you put in your Amazon cart. They bribe a guy at one point with $1,000 Amazon gift card. Yeah, this could not be any more blatant. The only time I remember product placement this blatant is, I don't know how many of you remember Glee. Ugh, God. They did an episode where they got to use Madonna music, and it could not have been clearer that the only reason they got to use Madonna music is if they agreed to kiss Madonna's ass throughout the entire show. Because that whole episode, as irritating and nauseating as Glee was originally, add in a sycophantic ass-kissing of Madonna for the entire hour runtime. And that's kind of what this film is. I was wondering why it was only on Amazon Prime and they didn't release it into theaters. Because, yes, Amazon saves the world. Thank God for Amazon. And that kind of segues into the real problem with this movie. And that is everything to do with Ice Cube and his family. I'll talk about the daughter first, and then we'll talk about the son. That gets ridiculous. So the daughter is some kind of microbiologist, or working with DNA, a doctor or scientist who is not smart enough to know that if you get a piece of rebar through your leg, leave it there, because pulling it out will cause you to bleed out, because that's exactly what she fucking does. It's like, I'm sorry, I thought you were a scientist. I'm not a scientist, and I know not to do that. You probably are supposed to know better than I do, but no. And who in the midst of an alien invasion has to lecture her father about being in control, and you're not in control. You couldn't control the disease that killed Mom. You have no power, and you're trying to hold on to power, and you don't have any power, Dad. Keep in mind, this chewing out and what's supposed to be a moment of a potential clarity for the Ice Cube character comes after he has hacked her phone to find her, used his connections to call in to check every hospital, see where she can go, hacked a fucking hybrid car to self-drive her to this safe location, and she's lecturing him about, you don't have any power, Dad. It's like, I'm sorry, who's driving the fucking robot car right now? Who turns off everything to conserve its battery? Who found you? It kind of seems to me like he has some power. Just my opinion. The annoyance of people taking moments of intense crisis to spell out a character's arc for them, as opposed to simply letting it happen organically, notwithstanding. It reminds me of the ending of 2012, where at the end, after the world's gone to hell, the little girl looks up at John Cusack and says, "Daddy, I didn't wet my pants." Well, thank God, that makes the whole thing worth it. I guess we came out on top after all. Yeah, okay, but now let's get into the son. All right. So, of course, Ice Cube is having problems with his son. The other subplot is that Ice Cube is attempting to track down a master hacker, a hacker activist, a hacktivist, if I may, to stop them from a plan of uploading all of this classified documents about a new intelligence gathering system called Goliath, the same system that attracted the aliens here. Lo and behold, spoiler alert, but I don't care.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. It's spoiler alert!
No, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
The hacktivist is his son. And his son chooses to take this opportunity to lecture his dad about government and surveillance and intelligence gathering. And of course it comes out that his son was completely right, because the government knew about these aliens and didn't tell anybody, and la 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 la. So now Ice Cube has to wake up and join the rebellion to watch the government, and only these plucky hacktivists can uncover the government conspiracy and stop the alien invasion. Aside from the fact that this is all done in the most hackneyed dialogue you can imagine, I want to give Ice Cube credit. I think Ice Cube is doing a good job here. I really do. I think it's a hard thing. He's the main character. He's on screen the entire time. You can't really, I don't know how they did it, but I imagine the other actors weren't there for him to interact with. If they actually filmed it over Zoom, I don't know. But simply put, I think he did a nice job. So I'm not ragging on him. I'm ragging on the so bad it's cringy dialogue, the hackneyed, by the book, anti-government, pro-chaos, rhetoric that they spout. Before anybody gets any ideas, no, I am not a Republican, and I do not agree with a lot of what the government does. But I also disagree with the concept that breaking the law because you think you're right. I don't agree with that as well. Also, and maybe this is a personal point here, but this goes all the way back to the 90s and the X-Files and all that. And I love the X-Files. I love Independence Day and things like that. But there's always this, we've got to uncover what the government knows about the aliens because they haven't told us. The people have a right to know. Maybe, but has anyone else ever watched those things and actually kind of sided with the government of like, can you imagine calling a press conference and going, okay, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we want to admit to you that extraterrestrials are real. They have come here. Everybody who says they've been abducted has, in fact, been abducted. They've been doing godless experiments upon us. And they are planning to colonize our world through the use of black goo that their consciousness is somehow deposited into. The black goo will be distributed amongst the populace via bees. And, can you imagine what would happen? First of all, we already know from 2020 when they said, UFOs are real, and people are like, and secondly, it's like, maybe it's good they kept some of this secret. Also, this is where my conspiracy theory goes. I know that the debate about privacy and government infringing on that and spying on emails and phone calls under this blanket statement of we're trying to keep you safe is problematic at best. That's the best I'm going to say without getting too political. And I know that it is still a hot button issue. Here's the thing I couldn't help but notice, friends. While it is still a very active issue, it is an issue that kind of reached its, not so much its peak, but its zenith during the Bush administration and the fallout of September 11th. And this is the government debate, the one that started and gained the most momentum during the Bush years, that this movie chooses to pick as its point of social anxiety. And again, it's not to say that this is not still an issue and not still a problem. It's to say that it feels like, as I've said, Spielberg said, and I agree, that War of the Worlds adaptations come around during the points of high anxiety for the citizenry. And yes, that was a point of high anxiety, and in some ways it still is. But as high as it was, no. I think there are some other issues the government and the people who run the government might be inflicting upon us that could, I'd say, create more anxiety than the idea of if someone is reading your email or checking your Amazon shopping cart. But then again, I'm guilty in a way here because I love Amazon. I'm an Amazonaholic, as most of us are. Isn't Amazon one of the companies that has been shown to support in some financial way or some other way, support the current government. How about that fucking conspiracy? Interesting that they're trying to ratchet up the anxiety that is still present and still important, but that was started with another president and not the current one. Funny that. So yeah, I'm sorry. At a certain point, this felt less like a diatribe against, the same old things about privacy and, people listening in and all of that, and felt more like, look, this other guy did bad things. Remember how mad you were at that guy? Well, he was bad. This new guy, he's not bad. The new president, he's gonna save the world. Yeah. Excuse me again. Seems a little creepy and more than a little disingenuous. It very much feels like the Eminem debacle. You remember a few years back when Fox News was losing their shit because Eminem decided to make the green Eminem less sexy. Instead of reporting on some of the less than above board things that their parent corporation were doing. No, the more important thing is that the Eminem isn't sexy anymore. No, the important thing here is not stuff that's currently going on, it's the stuff that the other presidents did. So yeah, thematically there are a lot of problems with that. And there are a lot of other problems that other people are going to be pointing out. CinemaSins, I'm sure, is going to have a field day with this. The way that this movie doesn't even follow through on situations that it sets up. It sets up that the alien attackers go and hack our systems and are crashing our airplanes and running ships aground and all, destroying our capabilities to defend ourselves. And yet the government is somehow able to launch 2 stealth bombers to attempt to bomb the Homeland Security Office for a last-minute ticking clock. How did that work? How is it that, again, they came to eat Facebook, but Amazon is still working? And YouTube is still working? How does that fucking work? They don't follow through on everything. And again, it's disappointing because there are the elements of an interesting take on this material. And as I said, there's that 10-15 minute stretch where it is everything I ever wanted a War of the Worlds movie to look like. But 10 to 15 minutes does not a good movie make. And boy howdy is this a mess it is so dull. And even they try to continue on with the, eyes in the sky and different news sources that he's looking at on his screen. But they get more and more obviously scripted and pat, again, speaking in cliches as opposed to what actual people would say. Again, that is where the original 39 radio broadcast, that's what it did so well. That's how it scared people, is it made it sound like people actually reporting in the moment. And not pre-scripted lines filled with cliches. So yeah, so this one is as bad as you think. It is as bad as you think it is. It's also one of the most unfortunate taglines for a movie. It's worse than you think. Yeah, Yeah, it is. So, unless you want a good laugh or a roll of the eyes, there's no reason to look this one up. It's another failed attempt. Maybe some filmmaker will hear this and decide to do what I've suggested, and if they do, please invite me to the premiere. I think that's the least you can do. So yeah, let's wrap this one up. So, final grade for the 2025 War of the Worlds. I'm going a D-. A D-, and the only reason it's getting that is because there are those 10 to 15 minutes that I thought were really, really phenomenal, and I got real excited about. But everything else in this is as bad as you've heard. It's as bad as you think it is. So unless you really want to laugh or roll your eyes in frustration, this is one to skip. So there you have it. Okay. So, thanks for coming along. Thanks for listening. Thank you for just all the support. And we'll see you next time. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.